In this class, we want to talk about the entrepreneur. We want to talk about definitions of the entrepreneur. In fact, there are many definitions, and we can't be comprehensive about what we're doing. But we can talk about what the idea of the entrepreneur is. We also want to talk about the attributes of the entrepreneur and contrast the entrepreneur with managers and with bureaucrats. So quite a bit to do in this session. You see from the bottom right hand corner of the slide there are in fact 47 slides in this video. You may want to stop the video from time to time and have a break and come back to it. Having said that, let's start. Timmons defined entrepreneurship as creating and building something of value from practically nothing. That is, entrepreneurship is the process of creating or seizing an opportunity and pursuing it regardless of resources presently controlled. It's a good definition. It incorporates many different aspects of entrepreneurship. I personally like one put forward by a writer called Israel Kirzner that simply says that entrepreneurship is alertness to business opportunities. The entrepreneur has to be alert to business opportunities, to profit opportunities or business opportunities. It's simpler, and I think it brings out the psychological nature of entrepreneurship, being alert. But Timmons in this one is also talking about building something from practically nothing, building up an organization in a way that is going to satisfy customer needs and wants, even though perhaps the customers at the moment don't perceive those needs and wants. The entrepreneur is going to alert the customer to those needs and wants and thereby induce sales within that sector. A new sector, a sector that the entrepreneur is making. So it's seizing an opportunity and pursuing it regardless of the resources presently controlled. Many entrepreneurs don't have a lot of resources at the start. Many of them are quite poor. They start from very humble beginnings. Many of them experimenting in the back room of their house, or experimenting in a workshop, or just trying things out. It could be people sitting around just doodling with a pen and paper. But out of this comes an idea. Entrepreneurs are different from a lot of other people because they can perceive, they can imagine a gap in the market, a niche in the market, and then set about controlling that niche and developing a product to control the niche and to win sales. And if their idea is very strong and very good and credible, banks and lending institutions may be interested in supplying the resources to set up. So, in that sense, if the idea is very good, they don't need to worry too much about the setup costs. Resources will flow to them because investors will see this as a good opportunity. As I said, there are many definitions of entrepreneurship. That's just one, and I've mentioned Israel Kirzner. But you'll see in the literature, if you do your own research, there are many different perceptions and ideas about the entrepreneur. I personally like the Israel Kirzner one, alertness to business opportunities. I think it's straightforward and to the point. The Timmons one here is more elaborate, but it's also a good definition, one worth keeping. Now the entrepreneurial attributes. Well, Gardner simplifies it to the creation of new organizations. Again, it's good. It creates new organizations, but But I think we have to be a little bit more specific and say it's creating products that will be sold on the market which were hitherto not even imagined. The new organization will have to be associated with the new product or the new service. It's the entrepreneur who brings the idea for the product into existence, and then, having imagined the product, will go about imagining what structure and what organization is required to deliver that product. So in that sense, I think this definition, this view needs to be extended to say new organizations associated with new products which are developed by the entrepreneur, which, as I said before this, they did not exist. The customers themselves may not even have imagined a demand for such products. We see this all around us. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, try to tell someone about a smartphone. They would not know what you were talking about. They did not have a demand for smartphones because they didn't understand it. The technology did not exist. And it's only when the technology becomes available and some bright people, some entrepreneurs, put it together and make it available for us, do we perceive a need for that. We want it. So all the time we are confronted by new products that we haven't thought about before. When we see them, we think, that's a good idea. We would like one of those. But before this, we didn't think there was a need for such a product. For our purposes here, entrepreneurs, well, they are or they do the following. They innovate and they creatively seize opportunity. So they innovate products. They constantly look at what products are available. They look at the technology that's available. They try to couple these together in ways which we haven't thought about before. That's what entrepreneurs do. And they come up with new ideas, new products, which then they present to us. Not all of which we want. So many entrepreneurial ideas will fail because we simply didn't want the product. But out of the full set of new ideas coming through, some will be successful and some will go on to become market leaders perhaps. If we think of vacuum cleaners, which have been around for a long time, most people would have thought the vacuum cleaner was a fairly well established technology, one which was not going to change. James Dyson, working for many years on his own and probably experiencing a lot of abuse almost from people who think he was very strange, to try to reinvent the vacuum cleaner, and how wrong those people could be. So there are always entrepreneurs who are looking at products and looking at ways in which they can improve the products and then present those products to us, the consumers. We get a better product quality, we get a better product, one with more functionality. Our lives are improved as a consequence of that entrepreneurial effort. They marshal resources. They're constantly looking at resources and looking at ways in which resources could be moved around and changed and modified and used in more innovative ways. Sometimes entrepreneurs are not necessarily bringing products to market, but they're looking at the way in which existing products are produced, and they are entrepreneurial within the business, changing the production system, changing the way in which the product is designed, delivered, manufactured, distributed, looking at new outlets. So they are constantly looking at resources, looking to see if they can optimize that resource package better than is currently done. They of course commit energy to the venture. Entrepreneurs tend to work very hard. They tend, from what we know of them and their backgrounds, they tend to work long hours. They tend to work 7 days a week. They tend to be totally committed and fixated and focused in on looking at the product. It's almost a controlling interest in their lives. They are focused entirely on this, and this is what we know from reading about very famous entrepreneurs. And we, as customers, we benefit from that. Of course, the entrepreneurs benefit because they get successful businesses, get high profits, high status in society, but they also get the satisfaction of having delivered an idea that was not there before. They have made it real and they have delivered it. So they commit a lot of energy to doing this. They want the business to grow. They want the business to be successful. They want to bring it into existence and then enable it to grow. That is the challenge that they face, and that's what they want to achieve. They add value to customers and they build a team. They add the value to the customers by giving us or making available to us new products. Ones which address needs, as I said earlier, we probably didn't recognize we had those needs. But now the products are there for us to enjoy. So we have a better quality of life. But they also build a team around the product which supports customer confidence in purchasing the product. They develop a team which will look to the further innovation of the product, to looking at extending the market and looking at the sustainability of the business. So the entrepreneur, from this list we can see, is a very busy individual, one who's constantly looking at new ways of doing things, new products that can come on the market, looking to build organizations, looking at bring it into existence, looking at sustainability, looking at customer value and customer perception. Now, entrepreneurs, managers and bureaucrats. Well, if we look at this as in a little chart, we'll have two axes here, and we'll have on the vertical axis self-perceived power to achieve goals. It's what we imagine we can do to achieve the goals, and the desire for growth or change on the horizontal. Now, if we just fill this in, we'd have just, if you like, a yes/no for self-perceived power to achieve goals. Do they have it? Yes, or do they not? And desire for growth, yes or no. Now, if we add in the entrepreneur and the manager, well, they have self-perceived power to achieve goals. Yes, both believe that they can achieve the goals. The desire for growth, well, the entrepreneur has got it, but the dissatisfied manager does not. The satisfied manager wants to stay as it is. They're happy with the organization as it is. They want to do a job. They want to go to work from 9 to 5 or whatever it is. They want to be happy. They don't want too much change in their lives. So the satisfied manager is a no. They don't want growth or change. The entrepreneur does. There's a big difference between managers and entrepreneurs. Self-perceived power to achieve goals. Well, there's a no for frustrated potential entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is, if they don't see self-perceived power to achieve goals, they become frustrated potential entrepreneurs. They're ones which have got ideas, but they don't do anything with them. They have a desire for growth, but they don't believe that they can achieve them. So they're just frustrated. They have this idea, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to get it started. And for the bureaucrat, they don't believe that they have the power to achieve goals, but they also don't want any change. They just want to process an activity. They want to sign off documents, or they want to do routine tasks. They're bureaucratic. They want to make sure all the paperwork is done correctly and that the organization is doing what it said it would do. But they don't want to do anything for change. If we look at the sustainable market niche and ability to manage growth as our two axes, and we have high and low for each, then a lifestyle small firm would have low ability to manage growth, but they would be sustainable. They would have a market niche. So it's a lifestyle. It's a small firm. They don't want to grow. It's a small firm. They don't want to grow. They want to have a particular lifestyle. They want to be happy, just make enough. But they are sustainable. They have got a product that people want. It may be an outlet in a nice town, and it meets people's lifestyles. They sell products that reflect people's quality of life, but they don't want to grow the business. They don't want to turn the shop into a chain of shops. With a sustainable market niche, the entrepreneurial firm would have high desire to look at the market niche and to develop. They wish to grow. They wish to grow fast. So entrepreneurial firms have that high desire for growth. For low sustainability, marginal small firms that are in existence but not doing too well, they are sustainable, but perhaps they're almost on the brink of just going under. If they have the ability to manage growth, and that is high, then it will be a successful small firm. And some small firms are highly successful because they're able to manage growth effectively. They're able to introduce new products. Whilst at the same time they're a small firm, they're able to introduce new products, they're able to bring in new customers, they're able to grow, and they're moving perhaps from small to medium size. Now, two views of the role of the entrepreneur. First of all, we can see the entrepreneur as a disequilibrator. When we think of market economics, we think of supply and demand. And supply and demand is when the two curves cross on our diagram, the Marshallian diagram, named after Alfred Marshall. Supply equals demand, we have an equilibrium. And many economists will say, well, if the price is too high, there'll be excess supply, not enough demand, so the price will have to fall. A small price, there might be excess demand, not enough supply, so the price will rise. And we have these forces leading us towards an equilibrium, as studied by economists. But the entrepreneur is a disequilibrator. The entrepreneur is constantly, in a sense, destroying markets and bringing in new markets. So the entrepreneur is constantly changing the world in which we live, introducing newness, introducing new products, new ways of working, constantly, in a sense, destroying the process towards equilibrium. So they are disequilibrators. But of course that's to our advantage. It sounds bad, but as customers we want new products. We want new ideas, and we want new ways of living and better quality products with more functionality. But in so doing, of course, we are destroying the old markets for the old products. famous writer Joseph Schumpeter, back in the 1930s, he said the entrepreneur is a force in creative destruction of an equilibrium. So he talked about creative destruction. The entrepreneurs are constantly destroying markets and introducing new products. But that's creative. It's the creative destruction of the equilibrium, bringing about new markets entirely and killing off old products. And that's how we get change in our society. So entrepreneurial is the discovery of niches, and that leads to this disequilibrium state. We could also see the entrepreneur, of course, as an equilibrator. The entrepreneur as a discoverer of disequilibrium, or of disequilibria, if there are many of them, looking at niches in the market not served. And these niches, if they're served, will generate many markets. So the entrepreneur is constantly looking at markets to see where the market is not satisfying a demand and bringing new products to bear. So new products are being developed, and in that sense there is an equilibrating process in play. So we have two views of the entrepreneur. One view of the entrepreneur is the person who is wrecking our supply and demand analysis, wrecking this process of moving towards the equilibrium by almost destroying that market and introducing new markets. And just as we're moving towards the equilibrium in the new market, it gets knocked over again, and then yet another new product is introduced. So the entrepreneur is constantly introducing new products, constantly changing the market situation. Or we could see the entrepreneur simply as looking at niches, or looking for niches in the market, looking for gaps in the market which are not currently being satisfied, and developing products to meet those requirements, and in that sense is equilibrating. So in this case the entrepreneurial effort is for looking for new combinations and leading on to an equilibrium state. So we have two views, and needless to say, in economics there is a big debate as to which one prevails and what are the ups and downsides of each. But that's not our remit here, so we won't look at that. Now, entrepreneurial ideas, well, discovered through systematic research for opportunities. Generally speaking, some entrepreneurs do systematically look for opportunities. Some don't. Some just spot them. It's just, as we'll see later, it's just serendipity. It's just luck. They happen to notice a gap in the market. Some will go out looking for opportunities and try to engage in some research to try and see what products can be produced. We live in an enterprising and innovating world. We're lucky in that sense that we see new products coming on the market that makes our lives better, that have more functionality, that enable us to communicate better, to make our lives easier at home, with new products to serve in the house and to work in the house, dishwashers, microwave ovens, things that did not exist in the past. We have very sophisticated smart televisions and highly sophisticated telephones and smartphones and so on. This makes it a highly innovating world, a world where ideas are passed around very fast, a world where products can come to market very fast. Many of these, as I said, are discovered serendipitously, discovered by luck. Sometimes entrepreneurs don't go looking for ideas, they just simply see They just look around them and they're observant, and they can perhaps see gaps or niches in the market that we can't see, because they are the entrepreneurs. They, they are lucky to be able to see perhaps gaps and see how to plug the gap that other people can't see. Build temporary or casual job into a business. By that I mean just sometimes people are working in a business and they can just suddenly see an opportunity to do something on a temporary basis, or do something just to fix a problem. But then they realize that if they develop that, it will be better than the original. So sometimes the idea for innovation within industry may come about because of so-called firefighting. They come about because there is a problem or an issue, and the company has to make do with some temporary measure. But the temporary measure itself then becomes dominant, and people realize with some tweaking it could be better than the original. And all of that has happened just by accident. If perhaps if the machine hadn't broken down or if the issue hadn't arisen, it would never have happened. Sometimes things are wanted by an individual consumer, but the individual consumer doesn't know they want them. But one day the individual consumer has to make do. They have to try to put together something to try and meet their demand, meet their requirement. And then they realize, if only there was a product to do this. Sometimes people build products that seem far-fetched to us. A wind-up radio. We can always get batteries, so why do we want a wind-up radio? But a wind-up radio was invented. But then it was discovered that there are parts of the world where we can't just get batteries. If you're living in the middle of Africa, you can't just pop into the local store and buy some batteries. So a wind-up radio is a really good idea. That wasn't the original intention. The original intention was just to have a wind-up radio. So in one market it's not that useful because we get batteries and we have electricity supply and so on. But in another area it could be very valuable. Again, just look. Sometimes we just read about an industry, or the entrepreneurs read about an industry and think that's an unusual way for them to go about their work. Why don't they do it this way? It would be much better. And we often hear people saying, why don't they do this? It would be better than doing that. A lot of that talk is not very constructive. It's not very well thought out. But amongst all of it, there may be some really good ideas. And those really good ideas are the ones that become entrepreneurial. Those are the ones that are going to make change. Sometimes a family member may come up with an idea or a requirement. They want something. They want some product that will do a certain job for them, but the product doesn't exist. And out of that requirement, it could spark off a search for what products are available to do this particular task, and if none exist, that could be the start of a new business. Sometimes when people travel, they get ideas. They see how people live in other countries, and they think about their own country, and they think about bringing back ideas to their own country from what they've seen overseas. It could be in many ways. It could be in food, it could be in lifestyle, it could be in the design of houses, it could be in any one of many different ways. But sometimes when people travel, they get ideas. Sometimes ideas are replicated or modified and these encountered throughout previous employment. Um, as a people, we move. We move location, we move house, we move district, we move area, we move to a different part of the country. We move from one company to the next. But of course, we carry our experiences with us. And our experiences are, we do this particular job in this way. When we go to a different company, we see them doing it a different way. And gradually, we start to think about modifying the way they do it, taking the best of the practices from our experiences, the best of the practices in the new business, merging them together, getting an entirely new way of working. And that could be the basis of some entrepreneurial proposal. But we do carry experiences with us, and we do rely on our experiences. And sometimes our experiences may be relevant in the context of the situation in which we find ourselves. We're able to think about it creatively, and we modify the situation in light of our experiences, and that is using our experiences in a different context, which is entrepreneurial. Let's go back to Schumpeter and the idea of creative destruction. The theory of discontinuous change. Now, discontinuous change means sometimes the change is not incremental. Sometimes it's quite radical. It jumps. Sometimes we're going along and there's not very much happening, and then suddenly there's a big jump. We see it in history. For hundreds, thousands of years we lived in a certain way, and then the Industrial Revolution happened. And society was completely transformed. And now we live in information. Information is everything. We live in a very electronic age. And again, our lives are changing, and changing very rapidly because of the internet, because of communication systems, because of telecommunications, because of many processes we see around us today. So change is not always smooth and continuous. Sometimes there are big jumps, and sometimes it's difficult to account for why it happened at that moment and what brought it about. But sometimes it was just simply down to serendipity, as I said earlier, good luck in certain areas, or it could be down to discoveries in science and breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs. But there are discontinuous changes. And economic development in the sense of carrying out new combinations. So there are discontinuous changes in markets, in products, but also in the way we work and the way we combine resources. We combine materials within our research in the sphere of industrial and commercial life. So sometimes, as I said, change is very radical. Maybe it's related to scientific breakthrough, scientific discovery. It could be through the work of universities and research centres that ideas flow out into the community that become commercialised. We're not really talking here about customer demand. We're not talking about what the customers are demanding in the market. We're talking about the ideas coming forward. Of all of the ideas that come forward, the customers will want some of them. They may not want all of them. So some of these new ideas coming forward may be rejects and may fail. Some coming forward may make an immense impact on our lives. Smartphones, microwave ovens, dishwashers, technology in cars, and it goes on and on. But not all have that impact. So that was Schumpeter writing back in 1934. Very forward-thinking ideas. Now, 5 cases for new combinations. Well, the introduction of a new good, or new quality of good, with which customers are not yet familiar. So that's one way. It's a new good Customers are not familiar. They have to be, in a sense, educated or inducted into using this new product. There could be a new quality to the product. That's new, and that's newness in the market. The introduction of a new method of production could be created by science, but also a new way of handling a commodity commercially. So sometimes science come up with new breakthroughs. It could be chemical engineering or electronic engineering or mechanical or whatever it is, and new breakthroughs, and suddenly there is a new way of working and a new way of design, new quality for the customer, and a new experience for the customer, which is welcomed because we live in a world which is dynamic. We live in a world in which we want change. We don't want the same products day in, day out. We don't want to live in a boring world. We want one with new products. And new methods of production coming through can perhaps enable these to come onto the market. Sometimes we just open a new market. We've all experienced globalization over the last couple of decades, or longer. But sometimes companies can see opportunities in other markets, in other countries. And it's not just bringing their products for sale in those other countries, but it's modifying the presentation of the products to meet local culture and being sensitive to the requirements of the customers in the other societies. And that requires careful thinking on the part of the entrepreneur. The conquest of a new source of supply of raw materials or half-manufactured goods. Because of rapid technological change and new discoveries and rapid changes in science over the years, we see new raw materials coming onto the market. We know that aeroplanes can now be constructed of very light fibre, and they're very strong, which will enable the planes to fly longer and be more fuel efficient and perhaps even safer. We see technology in the form of construction equipment. Farming has seen an immense revolution in the type of equipment they use on the farms for cultivating crops. So there's new sources of raw materials and also of capital equipment that's been made available. But new raw materials are constantly under development in research institutions. And these synthetic products are starting to make an impact in our lives, either as consumer products or as parts or components for items that utilize these products, for example in electronics. Carrying out of a new organization, for example a monopoly, the companies, when they form, generally speaking, we can imagine it's forming very small, but through the retention of profits and success through innovation and change and meeting customer requirements, the company grows. Eventually other companies may step in and try to imitate that product. And this is the process of competition. And through competition there will be an economic battle between the companies as to who's going to survive, who's going to make the best product for the customer, give the best service at the cheapest possible price. And over a period of time, some companies may fail, go out of business, make mistakes, introduce new products that are not successful, and they'll lose revenue and lose their capacity to continue. and perhaps eventually one company will become dominant. But that new company that becomes dominant may eventually become too relaxed about its position. It doesn't have to work too hard. It's the only one producing the product, so it slacks off. And that will create opportunities for new entrepreneurs to come in at the very bottom again with new designs, new radical proposals, and eventually take on the monopoly. So the monopoly will start to experience competition and will cease to be a monopoly as the new ones develop. And that all hinges on the monopolies becoming complacent with their monopoly position over time. So that's all we're going to do in our talk about entrepreneurship. We've covered a lot of ideas in this one. It's well worthwhile going back over it, making your own notes and doing some research. Perhaps go online, check out some of the ideas online and pad out your notes. It's well worth making notes of this, so use the stop start on the video, write out the notes, think about it, and the issues that arise out of here would make a good basis for seminar discussion. But that's all we're going to deal with in this, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.